Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Access Blockbusters Pod. This is, I believe, lucky number episode 13. If you are new to the channel, welcome. This is the official podcast of the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. And guys, it's been a while. It has certainly been a while. Well, I mean, I guess if you've been watching the channel for the past several months, it doesn't look like I've been gone. There have been videos posted onto the channel. Basically, long story short, I've been away for a little bit, just not being able to make videos, and so I've been posting some videos that have been made in advance, videos that can basically stay relevant even when I'm not able to make videos. But now, over the summer, I am back. We are here, and today's podcast is going to be a big sort of catch-up episode. Basically, the format of today's podcast is going to be a series of 5 spoiler reviews. I am going to try to fit in 5 basically in-depth, full-length thought spoiler reviews into this one episode, and I will be cutting them up into smaller videos and posting them onto the channel, probably on the same day, if not over the next few days or so. And so that there will be separate videos if people just want to hear my individual thoughts on one of these projects and they don't want to watch the whole podcast, which if you don't, then that's your loss, I guess. Just kidding. I don't know. But that is always an option for you as well. And speaking of today's podcast, we're going to try something a little bit different. I took some inspiration from Christian Harloff, movie reviewer on YouTube, and what we're going to try is maybe a little bit more casual, live sort of format. Obviously, this is a pre-recorded podcast, so if there need to be cuts, I will be making cuts and things like that. But what I really wanted to do is just sort of make this a little bit more like live, just kind of as things go with the flow kind of a podcast. And so there will be very minimal cuts. If there's background noise, I apologize. We're just gonna have to deal with whatever that is. And what I also decided to do, again, taking inspiration from Christian Harloff, is, for those of you who are watching the podcast on YouTube, I kind of felt bad because in the previous episodes, I would just kind of throw up my Access Blockbusters Pod logo or something like that, or the thumbnail of the video, and just kind of call it a day. I would assume that if you're watching on YouTube, maybe you would just be, I don't know, having it open on a separate window and doing other things. But in case you're, interested in looking at something as we're going along here, let me just double check that this is working. Let me see, and boom, we are good to go. Yep, okay. And as you can see, we have some visual aids. I know, isn't that crazy? So I created a little series of images that will help kind of guide me along as we go throughout this podcast, kind of help me talk about, what I want to talk about, and it'll also give you guys something to look at if that'll help. I don't know if this will be helpful at all. If you guys find this distracting, if you guys find the clicking and the keyboard and the sort of live format and the off the cuff sort of way that we do the podcast in this episode distracting at all, or you guys don't like it, then let me know, and we'll try to spice it up or do something different. It's always a struggle to find the best way to make a podcast episode when you're just kind of going solo, because you're always kind of wondering, do people actually enjoy listening to me talk for an hour and a half? I really don't know the answer to that question, so we're just kind of going with it and seeing what happens. So that is the long-winded introduction of me saying welcome back. We're back. And without further ado, you guys already kind of saw that, but let's talk very briefly about what the summer and the months ahead look for the Access Blockbusters channel. So, I mean, first of all, thank you all so much for continuing to support me as I kind of go through periods of extra busyness and just working on other projects and things like that. I have talked about this time and time again, so there are plenty of other videos on the channel talking about what where I am at that certain point and what the future of the channel holds. And so I won't make this a separate, segment or a separate video. I just wanted to quickly touch upon it and say that for the foreseeable future, I'm thinking that the summer will still be podcasts, just like I did last summer. It's a little easier for me to kind of produce and prepare for and edit and things like that and release in a timely manner. And we also get to kind of keep up with everything that's going on, especially because things like Obi-Wan and Miss Marvel, Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Adam, She-Hulk and Andor, and all these sort of things are coming out over the next few months, and so it's good. And Stranger Things 4 is wrapping up, so it'll be good to kind of keep up, because really what this channel is, like I've said many times, is more than anything else. I mean, I appreciate all of you guys so much, but if I had 0 subscribers, it would still be the same. This channel is just a way for me to just talk about what I want to talk about and give my thoughts, and kind of just have a record of what I think about certain things, and my thoughts on movies and thoughts on shows and blockbuster media and things like that. So it's this channel will kind of always be that for me. I think no matter how big it gets, or if I lose all 700 some subscribers tomorrow, it'll still be that, and I want to keep it that way. So the podcast will still sort of be the main brunt of content coming this summer. And there will be some videos sprinkled in, obviously. I'll be working on those. And again, you guys will have to let me know in the comments, whether you like this image sort of thing that we got going on here. If there are other ways for me to help make the podcast more interesting, bring in guests, I don't know, bring in segments and answer more questions and things like that. Today I wasn't able to compile any questions for the Access Blockbusters pod, but for the future weeks, there will absolutely be question and answer portions as we go along. So there is that. And as far as videos go, so you guys have been kind of noticing, we're kind of going through cycles, right? Like the summer is sort of the podcast where I kind of get to catch up with you guys and talk about things that are going on currently. And then sort of during, the fall, winter, and the spring, we kind of have some videos coming up and things that I've been working on over the summer. And I anticipate that'll be pretty much the same here. We just wrapped up our rewatch of the Spider-Man films, which was really fun, guys. Thank you so much for watching those videos. Made something like 10 to 12 videos and gathered something like 200 to 300 views, and it was great. It was great to hear all of your thoughts on all of the Spider-Man movies as we watched No Way Home together and celebrated that, which was awesome. So for this year, I'm thinking that as the summer comes to a close, and again, that's very far in the future, this video, by the way, will be coming out around Thursday or Friday, just to let you guys know. So, I'll anticipate posting this, maybe, I'm hoping by Thursday, but if not Thursday, then Friday. Recording it on Wednesday, so just full transparency. But anyways, as the summer wraps up, we will be doing, I'm hoping that I'll be able to start another rewatch series and have all of those videos recorded and edited by the time that around September comes, and we can have those videos ready to go. Just to give you guys some insight into how I choose what I want to rewatch and how I want to make those videos, it really has to do more with series that have a definitive close or definitive break, if that gives you a hint. Because, and another video that has been getting a lot of feedback as to, when's the next part coming out, is the ranking literally every single MCU character, which I loved making. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, but it was amazing. And I will absolutely be making a second version of that video because, my gosh, there have been, 10 to 15 new Marvel projects that have come out since then. The problem with that video, though, those kinds of videos and these rewatch series, is that those videos take a while to make and release. When I started the Spider-Man rewatch, when I first put on Spider-Man 2002 and started watching it, and from that moment to when Spider-Man No Way Home came out was a long time, and I knew I could do that, though, because I had the time until the next Spider-Man movie was coming out. If I make the next ranking literally every MCU character video right now, by the time that video has come out, it will already have been outdated. So I'm waiting for a good kind of marker, if you will. I'm really hoping that Kevin Feige comes out at D23 and announces when the definitive end of Phase 4 is, so that I have a date to eye on of when I can start working on it. So that way I can make, ranking literally every single MCU character part 2, parentheses, Phase 4, something like that. So all that to say, the next rewatch series will be something that either has ended completely outright, or more likely, hint, hint, wink, wink, doesn't have any major content coming out for at least the foreseeable future, so that I can give myself enough window to kind of keep those videos as fresh as possible. I've spent way too much time talking about the future. Let's talk about the present. Or actually, let's talk about the past, because like I said, we have 5 spoiler reviews of MCU projects coming, or not MCU projects, what am I saying? I'm just looking at the slides that I've listed of projects, movies, and television shows that have come out over the last 3 months and that are coming out right now. And without further ado, yeah, let's just dive right into them. So, the first spoiler review, and if I didn't make it clear, these are all spoiler reviews. So if you haven't seen any of the following, all of Moon Knight, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Miss Marvel episode 1, Obi-Wan Kenobi episodes 1 through 4, and Stranger Things 4 volume 1, then you can skip around. These will all be individual spoiler reviews. And you can listen to whatever one you want. Obviously, there will, like I said, will be separate videos coming out over the next couple days of those reviews. So if you want to watch them separately, you can. But again, these will be full spoiler reviews. This is going to be the only time I say that, so just keep that in mind. Let's talk about Moon Knight. So Moon Knight was a show that came out, I believe, in mid to late March. And continued all the way basically up until Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, Moon Knight was a show that, just looking at the trailers, I was just so excited for. It promised that kind of gritty action looking at this image, like the psychological thriller with the mirrors and the split personalities and the multiple identities and the intrigue. And then you also had the sort of cosmic side to it, like here with the Moon Knight costume and that scene at the end of the first trailer of him really beating up that, what we know now to be sort of an Egyptian spirit jackal or whatever, from Amit, in that museum bathroom. And you also had Khonshu and everything like that. So I mean, really, I had thought, and I think this with almost every single MCU show, to be quite honest, and I think they do a good job with this. We'll talk about that more with Ms. Marvel, of differentiating their shows, right? Like, every show is so wholly unique and so wholly different that I just, every time a trailer comes out, even She-Hulk, which, by the way, I won't talk about the She-Hulk trailer in much depth. You can go to the community tab of my YouTube channel to check out my thoughts on the trailer. I didn't love the trailer. I really didn't. But you can't deny how different it looks from everything else in the MCU, a legal procedure. Moon Knight being the psychological thriller with some supernatural elements, and Miss Marvel being a teen comedy coming of age, all with sort of that superhero tilt, and I was just super excited. The first couple episodes were phenomenal. To me, Moon Knight episodes 1 and 2 are some of the best MCU content I think we've seen in quite a while. I said the same thing about Loki episodes 1 and 2, to be fair, but I do stand by that. I recently actually did rewatch all of Loki. My thoughts haven't changed a whole lot on that show. This isn't a Loki review, but I promise this is relevant in the sense that Loki was wildly inconsistent, right? It started out super strong, and it really took a nosedive. It kind of went back up, and then it went back down. You can go watch my reviews for Loki, all the individual episodes on the channel. So, it's kind of sad because I watched the first 2 episodes of Moon Knight, and I go, yeah, I mean, this show is really good, right? Can it last? And I mean, we'll talk about this in just a little bit, but to that effect, it seems like Marvel is almost following a trend, having really strong opening episodes like WandaVision did, like Loki did, like Hawkeye kind of did, Falcon Winter Soldier kind of did, Moon Knight did, and Miss Marvel does so far, kind of dipping in the third episode. To me, the third episode of WandaVision, not as great as the first 2. Loki, I really didn't like the third episode. I don't even remember what the third episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier was, to be fair. Was that on Madripoor? I don't remember. Third episode of Hawkeye, don't really remember. That might have been the Echo episode. Third episode of Moon Knight was the one with Midnight Man, rest in peace, to the actor who played him. He passed away just before the show came out. That's really quite a shame. Really quite tragic, but yeah, and then the third episode. So the third episode happens, and I'm like, okay, this show is good. It's fine. Um, like not the show, this episode. And then we go to episode 4, and it's sort of this tomb raiding adventure, which a lot of people really loved. I wasn't as big of a fan of it just because it was such a tonal shift from the first few episodes of being that psychological thriller. Um, I'm willing to sort of, well, I that's not to say that I don't appreciate a good tonal shift in a show. I think that it can work very well, like WandaVision did, of course, but it was very intentional in that series. Episode 4 of Moon Knight kind of felt like it was just, sort of a tonal shift for the sake of a tonal shift. And then it kind of goes into where's that picture? There we go. In the asylum, right? And okay, so I mean, I have a few thoughts about the asylum, but just the long and short of it is, I thought it was a really interesting concept if they were able to explain it correctly, because the idea that this all might have been taking place in Mark Spector's head, or that there is some sort of underworld duality here with episodes 4 and 5, or that the real world is the real world, I thought, okay, it's a really brave concept. It's a really interesting idea. If you can explain this really well, I'm on board. This has the potential to be one of the best MCU shows ever. No, not that. Wait, where am I going? We got this instead, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the fact that they weren't able to really explain what happens here, and if you guys have like a really robust explanation of the asylum and what it was really supposed to represent, please let me know in the comments. I understand that this is some sort of manifestation of the underworld in Mark Spector's head. What I don't quite understand is really the Dr. Harrow part of it. What is that supposed to represent? Because the show gives off so many mixed signals. Like when he gets drugged, it seems to be an indication that this asylum that we're seeing in this picture is because of the medications. And then obviously Dr. Harrow is trying to talk to him about all these sorts of things that aren't real, like the hippo. He's like, oh, it's a hippo, rhinoceros, or whatever. That's funny. And then he goes back to that, that version of reality at the very end of the show, and I just couldn't help but wonder what that really was about. It's like, what are we supposed to make of that? Is that sort of a way of him coping? Like his mind trying to say that this isn't real, and then him finally accepting that, no, this is real. I don't know. Part of me had really hoped, seeing that we would kind of stick to this really dark reality of nothing is real, and this is really just some guy who's dealing with mental health struggles. The MCU wouldn't do that, not in full. Obviously, episode 5 of the show is amazing because of Oscar Isaac and the way that they portray dissociative identity disorder in such a respectful and sensitive way. But just the idea that Marvel still has to have Moon Knight the character be a part of the MCU, even though this show is disconnected. That Moon Knight's going to show up in the Halloween special or Midnight Suns or whatever, and it kind of prevents the show from being just a well-rounded, connected show, to be quite honest. So, that was a bit of a bummer, to me, honestly, and yeah, it's hard for me to kind of accept that this crazy twist happens when they weren't really able to explain it well, in my opinion. And then we get this, and look, giant CGI monsters battling in the sky. All of the MCU finales have not been amazing, let's be honest. I think the WandaVision finale, even though WandaVision is amazing in my opinion, was not great. The Falcon and Winter Soldier finale was pretty lackluster in my opinion. Loki finale I really didn't like. Hawkeye finale was just okay. And this is just another okay finale to what could have otherwise been just a phenomenal show. By the way, nothing to take away from Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac deserves an Emmy for this show. It is just some of the best acting I've ever seen in my life. And the fact that he just really went for it in that way, I just cannot applaud him enough. But seeing Amit and Khonshu battle it out as giant kaiju in the middle of Egypt, it really took some of that bite out of the show that it had. And I felt a little bit dissatisfied with the ending. We'll talk about another show later on in this episode that really knows how to stick the landing, and that's what really makes it just that much better of a show in Stranger Things. The Marvel shows just really haven't done it, and that's why we're 5 live action shows in, going into a 6th, and I can't help but be nervous every time I see a great first episode, because I go, what are we heading towards? Like, where are we going? Is it going to be a massive disappointment yet again? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll get to Jake Lockley at the end of this segment, but I wanted to touch on a couple other characters. Obviously, Arthur Harrow. Ethan Hawke was just wonderful. He brought that charisma. I didn't love how he just ended up having his staff and shooting laser bolts at the end of the series finale. He was just kind of, shooting purple laser bolts out of his staff, and that was a little disappointing. But Ethan Hawke gave one of the more charismatic performances as a villain. I really wish they did explore him more as a character. Again, we've talked about this before. The 6 episodes have to stop. It has to be at least 8, if not 9, 10 episodes long, and each episode has to be at least 45 minutes long. I don't care, Marvel. I'll talk about this a little bit. No, actually, I'll talk about this now. Part of the problem with the MCU shows is that there's too many of them. And there's too many of them. But one of the underlying problems with that is that, look, by having too many shows enter production at once and having them kind of churn out like pieces of content, it doesn't allow you the time to really develop a story and really develop characters the way you want them to. Like, Stranger Things took 3 years to come out, Stranger Things 4. And it shows, because it shows the level of care and quality that has been put into that one show versus these 10 shows that are coming out over the next 2 years. It's a side point, but I think it makes itself known here as well with Ethan Hawke. Now, May, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I don't have it up here. I don't want to try to butcher it, so I'm just going to call her May or Layla. The actress who portrays Layla, I think she did a good job. A lot of people were really raving about her performance. I thought she did a very fine job, very good job in the role, and I actually really, really do like that they made her gave her a leading role as the Scarlet Scarab, I believe, is what the superhero alter ego is. I think that's really great. I think that if they had kind of just left her as the love interest, the sort of determined love interest who has a past with the main character, it would have been much more boring and just, just another cliche thing to put in a superhero project. But the fact that they gave her powers while also kind of being ironically a cliche superhero thing, I think worked well. I was actually very happy to see her kind of suit up here to wear it and have this really cool costume. I hope that she and Mark kind of get to go on some adventures in the future. I don't know if that's possible anymore with the whole Jake Lockley thing, but I think she did a good job. I think Layla was a good character, not a great character. I think that the actress May did a really good job with what she was given, so I was happy about that. And finally, before we head out I'm going the other way. Where am I going with this? Before we end this spoiler review and move on to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. By the way, guys, I understand that I'm really late on these reviews. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this is just about me putting my thoughts out there for you guys to hear, if you guys even care to hear about it. If one person listens to it, if nobody listens to it, that's fine. It's just me talking about my thoughts. So that's why, I'm still talking about these, even though it's been about a month since they've come out. But here they are. So, Jake Lockley. Part of me is really intrigued by the decision to have sort of the final battle with Harrow and Moon Knight kind of be off screen with Jake. Part of me also thinks that this should have been part of season 1, and season 1 should have just been like 12 episodes, honestly. So part of it intrigues me. Part of it really frustrates me, to be quite honest with you. And I think that if they're going to explore Moon Knight into season 2, that is just Moon Knight still, I think that's cool. I think if Moon Knight next appears in Midnight Suns or something like that this just becomes very confusing to me. It's not like one of those Baron Mordo post-credit scenes where you kind of can just leave it there for 5 years. We'll talk about that in just a second. It's one of those things that you kind of need to pick up, right? Because this is what's happening. This is the character now, in the body or whatever's going on. So yeah, I mean, on the one hand, all the theories about Jake did and Jake's coming and Jake's that, like, it didn't, the longer the show went on, the less it made sense. To kind of have it sort of be the Deus Ex Machina that comes in at the end to save everybody and defeat Harrow is interesting. I don't know if I liked it necessarily, but I do think it's an interesting choice. And I think that, if anything, if I got anything out of the show, it is that Oscar Isaac gave one of the best performances I have ever seen in my entire life. And that I believe that no matter where he shows up next in the MCU, as Moon Knight or in other projects, I'm just going to be so excited to see him again. So that's sort of my thought. Those are sort of my thoughts on the Jake Lockley thing. But overall, I think the show had potential to top WandaVision. I think ultimately it will still nestle very firmly towards the top third of the MCU, which is now some 35 projects. And that is no small feat, by the way. The top third, the top 10 to 15 projects are, in my opinion, phenomenal. But I think that it could have been more. And I feel like I'm saying this with every single MCU show at this point, and I feel like a broken record. Miss Marvel, spoiler alert, started out really strong, in my opinion. We're just going to have to see where it goes. I'm going to have to believe it when I see it. When I see an MCU show stick the landing. And Moon Knight certainly wasn't the show to do it, even though I really liked it. So those are my thoughts on Moon Knight. Let me know what you guys think about Moon Knight in the comments of the podcast video on YouTube or on the comments of the spoiler review itself. All right. Wait, I keep doing that. I keep hitting the up arrow instead of the down arrow. Here we go. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, spoiler review. It's been a month. I know. I don't care. We're going to talk about it. So let's talk about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I'm looking at the images now. I'm tempted to start out with Wanda, but I'm going to save my thoughts on Wanda for just a second, because that's going to be a whole soapbox onto itself. So let's just sort of give some general thoughts on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. What did I think about the movie? Obviously, if you've been following on the community tab at all on my YouTube channel, you'll know that I actually did enjoy the movie quite a bit. Actually, and I've had some time, obviously. It's been about a month since the movie came out. I've had some time to really kind of think about my thoughts and kind of think about what this movie is and where it kind of stands in the MCU. I'll tell you right now that in my rankings, which I update usually right after I see the movie and then kind of let it marinate and maybe change it up a little bit over the next coming days. And right now, it is very firmly in the middle, right? It's, out of the 35 some projects that have come out of the MCU, it's in the middle. And, the first Doctor Strange is also sort of towards the middle. And I don't think it's because these two movies are bad, necessarily. I just think that they're not as good as they could be, which is fine. We don't need the next, I don't know, we don't need the next Citizen Kane to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's fine. We don't need the next Infinity War to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But it just means that it's, in my opinion, a good movie. And maybe not a great one. And that's totally fine. So let's start out with talking about the three characters on the screen right now, from left to right. America Chavez, I think, is an interesting character. I think Xochitl Gomez plays her really, really well, and she's pretty charismatic throughout the film. I think that her backstory is really interesting. Sort of, where did she come from? What's the deal with her mothers? Where did she get her powers? A lot of people actually talked about how ridiculous it was that the bee kind of was the trigger for her powers. And maybe this is just personally, just a subjective thing. As somebody who was terrified of bees myself, I actually kind of bought that explanation, to be honest. Like, I would have reacted in a very similar way and probably unleashed my own powers if I had any. So, again, that's just a personal thing, but it didn't bother me. And that's, again, opinions about movies and things are subjective. So, there you go. I think that her powers will be interesting going forward. Obviously, she's being set up to be such an important figure in the MCU, being able to open and close portals into the multiverse and all that sort of stuff, which is interesting. I don't know if that's going to make her completely overpowered as we get along into the MCU, and she's going to have to eventually be nerfed or something like that. She's also training to be a sorcerer. Ned Leeds, by the way, it has you beat America, because he's just opening portals left and right, and you're struggling at the end of this movie to open a portal. So there's that. But overall, I think that she is a good character. I don't think we saw nearly enough of her to kind of make a decision about, what we think about her overall. But I will say that, baseline fundamentally, Soji Gomez is a great actress. She did a great job. And I think that the character moving forward will have a lot of important things to do throughout the MCU phases 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it may be. Sorry, I just had to adjust something really quick. Okay, the next character up here is Wong. Wong is, let's be clear. Benedict Wong is always great in these movies. And really, Phase 4 is really becoming the MCU, or what did he call it? The Wong Cinematic Universe, because he's been in Shang-Chi, he's been in Doctor Strange 2, he's been in Spider-Man No Way Home, he's going to be in She-Hulk. And I think that Benedict Wong is always great in whatever he does. I don't think he was given a lot to do in this movie, to be quite honest. Obviously he was captured for a bit, and then he went up to the castle, which I am totally blanking on the name of it right now. I would have totally lost on that, and if that was a trivia question, Winder something. Anyways, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I keep trying that. So I think he was good. He was good as always, and he's always fun to see. I also really like that he's the Sorcerer Supreme. I don't think that'll last, obviously, and I really hope that doesn't mean he's gonna die in the next film that he shows up in. I don't think he's gonna die in She-Hulk, obviously, but the next film that he shows up in, because I think that obviously Stephen Strange is Sorcerer Supreme, and they can't really have him just not be the Sorcerer Supreme for too much longer. But I do like that the dynamic of him and Strange towards the end, of just the respect that they have for one another, I think is great. Stephen Strange himself, I think is good. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is always good in the role, and he gets to play a lot of different versions of himself, which is fun. That being said, I don't necessarily think this is his strongest outing, and that's why we'll get to that in just a second with nope, I keep doing that. Where is it? There we go. With the post-credit scene, but I don't know how excited I am for Doctor Strange 3, to be quite honest. I'm very excited to see Doctor Strange again in the role, and I think that has everything to do with Benedict Cumberbatch, but I did mean to go back up this time. I don't think that Doctor Strange himself, I don't know that I'm as endeared to him as a character on his own anymore. I think the first Doctor Strange film did a really good job. I don't know that I'm really excited to see a Doctor Strange 3 at this point in time. That might just be me. They might have some crazy concept, bring in Nightmare, bring in Clea, and do all that sort of stuff. We'll just have to see about that. But speaking of the villains, potential villains, let's talk about Scarlet Witch. I know that this has been a debate that's probably about dead by now. But I'm going to give my thoughts anyways, because this is my channel and I get to do that. So, Wanda Maximoff. Was her villain turn in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness warranted? I'm going to say absolutely. Now, I understand. As somebody who really, really loves the character of Wanda Maximoff and really, really loves WandaVision. Really loves WandaVision. I understand people being upset that she's a villain. I understand, even I myself was upset that she was a villain, just because I liked the character so much, and seeing her do all these horrific things was not easy to see. But in terms of character development, this makes sense to me. And this, I don't want to open up the Last Jedi can of worms. I will. Just for a tiny second. I don't quite understand why fandoms in general these days have such a hard time grasping that people can change. Like, people have the ability to change. It's very baffling to me, honestly. With Luke in The Last Jedi, kind of thinking about how it's been 30 years since Return of the Jedi. And of course that's not the same Luke that you saw, given that everything he's gone through since Return of the Jedi. Of course it's not the same Luke. Now, Wanda's a little different, obviously. It's only been a couple of years. You kind of see the end of WandaVision, but I still think WandaVision set everything up that it needed, that needed to kind of go into Doctor Strange 2. And here's why. At the end of WandaVision is a story about grief and about the acceptance of grief and kind of letting go of past trauma and things like that. And I think it did that beautifully. Grief, though, is not something that just goes away. You have to understand. It's not something that just dies because you accepted it. And, you know, like even if you go through the 5 stages, it's like it's not just over. So while I understand the argument of like, oh, she completed her arc in WandaVision, she's still gonna grieve the loss of Vision and her kids. Now, Vision not being in Doctor Strange 2 is a I don't know if it's a plot hole, but just sort of a thing that I accept as well. I don't know where Vision was. I think that White Vision needed to show up, or at least a multiverse Vision needed to show up to kind of, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me either. So I'll give everybody that. But the kids, I think that at the end of WandaVision, we see her in the cabin, we see her experimenting with the Darkhold, and we see that while she has sort of accepted that, I don't know, that her Westview experiment was sort of not the most ideal way to go about, there is another way to get her kids, and that temptation creeps back into her mind. We know that the Darkhold is a corrupting power. That sort of a writing cop-out. I'll give it that as well. It's like, yeah, I mean, she's being corrupted by the dark side or whatever. Like, fine, you know, that's not the cleanest and most, or that is one of the more squeaky clean ways to kind of turn a good character evil. But all that to say is that everything you need to have Scarlet Witch be the villain is set up, I believe, at the end of WandaVision. Plus, and I also understand this is not explicitly said in Doctor Strange 2, it has been some time since the end of WandaVision. So it's not like the next day after Westview, she turns into this scary, evil Scarlet Witch. But which, by the way, Elizabeth Olsen gives just a tremendous performance. She just gives one of the best MCU performances I have ever seen. Wow, she is scary, she is terrifying, and she is probably one of the best MCU villains I've ever seen, honestly. I think she ranks right up there in tier 1. I'm just going to say it. You may disagree, that's totally fine. I think she ranks right up there with Thanos, Killmonger, Vulture, Wenwu, Green Goblin probably. She's right there. But to have that, to have that understanding that it's been a couple of years, she's been experimenting with the Darkhold, and now she realizes that she has a way to get her kids back, it just makes sense to me. And then to have this really satisfying, to me, now we'll talk about the writing in just a second, but to me, to have this really satisfying narrative arc of, at the end of the movie, kind of realizing that how far she has gone to get her kids, and that her kids are scared of her now, it's just, I mean, it's satisfying to me, And I think that honestly, as much as I love the character of Scarlet Witch and as much as I love Elizabeth Olsen in the role, I think she should remain dead. I think that the character has gone through enough. I think we've done just about everything we could have with this character. I think she should remain dead. I know they won't. They're going to bring her back, but I think she should remain dead. And I think that because I like Elizabeth Olsen's turn as the villain so much is probably why I like the movie. I'm one of those people who like the movie, which I understand that there are people who don't. On the other side, that's okay. But I think a lot of it hinges on what you think about Elizabeth Olsen. Now, let's talk about, I did that again. I need to stop doing that. Let's talk about the Sam Raimi-isms, if you will. And then we'll get to the Illuminati, and we'll talk about the post-credit scene, and we will move right along. Sam Raimi really put a stamp on this movie, and I think for the better. Some of the imagery in this movie, especially with the Illuminati, obviously, was just terrifying. With the way that Black Bolt died, the way that Mr. Fantastic died, and just some of the Scarlet Witch imagery with the oil on her face as she's walking through the hallways and just ripping Ultron bot heads apart. It's just like scary stuff, I'm one of those people who really love the music fight. As somebody who's played music before, I think it's just super cool, the way that they did that. And I love the Zombie Strange at the end. I think that sometimes, I do concur that when he's sort of giving that emotional speech to America Chavez and he's in the zombie form, it kind of looks really silly and really dumb. It looks a little cartoonish, but at the end of the day, it didn't really ruin it for me. And I think that Sam Raimi really made his definitive mark on this movie, and I think it's all the better for it, honestly. I do. Now, understanding that there are different so on the one hand, understanding that there are different teams that make these movies and shows, but also understanding that Michael Waldron wrote Loki and then wrote Doctor Strange 2, it's a bit bizarre how this is all not seemingly connecting together. Kevin Feige came out on the red carpet and said, "Oh, it's because of Sylvie and Loki that these things could happen," but it's not been made clear. It's a growing problem with the MCU of how they're dealing with continuity, and also with Star Wars. Even we'll talk about that with Obi-Wan. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye out on, because if the multiverse is really going to be this important, it's getting very hard to follow. But anyways, I think that going through the different universes and really sticking with Earth 838, I think that people had this problem of like, why didn't you go to 70 different universes? I think that grounding it in one or two actually made the story a little bit stronger, and I wasn't that upset about the fact that they didn't go to 70 billion different universes at once. Though I think that the sequence of them traveling through the multiverse could have been explored a little bit more. But at any rate, so yeah, I think that Sam Raimi, given that he had to come in not last minute, but pretty close to the end of pre-production, just did a really great job. Now let's talk about the big thing in this movie, which is the Illuminati, and let's talk about just cameos in general. I was very worried going into this movie that it would just be cameo central, that this movie would just be cameo after cameo after cameo, and that it would just be about who shows up next. And look, I love a good cameo as much as the next person. I think, though, Spider-Man Far From Home is one of the strongest, and you'll see why this is related in just a second. Spider-Man Far From Home, to me, is one of the greatest MCU movies that have ever been made. I think it's a top 10, easily. I think it's top 5 even. I don't remember, honestly, my own rankings. But the reason it's so great, it doesn't have any cameos in it. I mean, until the very end with Talos and Soren. It doesn't have cameos. It's just a good movie. And honestly, I think the MCU and Star Wars as well have just kind of gotten away from that whole idea of, like, let's make a good movie first before just putting in a bunch of these cameos, like Book of Boba Fett. Like, oh, we forgot that Boba Fett's in his own show because we had Luke Skywalker in there, so people won't notice. Well, we noticed. But anyways, so I was worried about that. We heard Professor X in the trailer. Here's his hand. I couldn't really find a picture of him. Anyways, where's I going with that? Oh yeah, Professor X. So we saw Professor X in the trailer, and that just really made me worry, because it was like, okay, if they're revealing Professor X, it's like, oh man, like, how many actual cameos do they have? Turns out 5, and they were all part of one team. So we had Black Bolt, we had Anson Mount playing Black Bolt again, from the Inhuman show that bombed. We had Lashana Lynch playing Maria Rambeau's Captain Marvel, Haley Atwell playing Captain Carter, Patrick Stewart reprising his role as Charles Xavier, and of course we had the one and only Jim Halpert, John Krasinski, playing Mr. Fantastic. And the fact that they were all part of one team, the Illuminati in Earth's 818's universe, that they all served a purpose in the story, and they weren't just there. Like, they didn't just show up. Apologies if you can hear that noise, by the way, outside. Like I said, we're just going with it. So, apologies for that. But if the fact that they actually had some narrative purpose in the story and just some reason to be there, and that they worked in the story and they were great and they were fun, and it wasn't just cameos for the sake of cameos, I was just beyond happy. I think that this is how you do cameos. Spider-Man No Way Home also, but those weren't even cameos, like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in the movies for 30 minutes. So like I said, cameos for cameo's sake it's so dangerous. And I hope that these movies do not stray towards that sort of idea of, let's just put in random people that we've seen, like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, which I would have loved to have seen, by the way, but he did not fit in this movie at all. Like, if Hugh Jackman's Wolverine was in the Illuminati, I would have been so confused, because he does not fit there. Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool doesn't fit in this movie. I mean, he could have if they rewrote some things, but it doesn't make sense narratively, and so I'm really glad about that. So yeah, the movie wraps up. They fight, Zombie Strange fights and all that sort of stuff. And where's Zombie Strange? There's Zombie Strange. And then we get the post-credit scenes. And to be honest, this is one of the most lackluster post-credit scenes I've ever seen in an MCU movie. Not the Bruce Campbell one. And actually, I've heard that the Bruce Campbell one was more polarizing than this one. I think the Bruce Campbell one was actually hilarious, to be quite honest. I kind of understand. No, I do understand why a lot of people didn't like that one. Because it was kind of like, oh, you made us stay through the credits and stuff. You're not obligated to stay through the credits, though. And I find it kind of hilarious because it's like 5 to 10 minutes. And I guess like people have places to be, but if 5 to 10 minutes is gonna like kill your day, I don't know. I really don't know, because I think it was funny, and even if it was kind of a waste, it was like funny. Anyways, we're not here to talk about the Bruce Campbell post-credit scene. We're here to talk about the other one with Charlize Theron and Theron, I don't know, and Third Eye Strange. I hate the Third Eye. I think it looks dumb. I think it is dumb. I hope they get rid of it like Thor's missing eye, ironically eyes everywhere. I think it looks really dumb. Clea, fine, sure. Dark Dimension, sure. Incursion set up for, Secret Wars or whatever. It's fine. It's whatever. But I don't care as much. And I don't know why that is, honestly. I just find myself not really caring about it, And I don't know whether or not that's because of this movie, or if I just saw this scene regardless and saw it attached to a different movie altogether, if that would have been the case. I just don't really care all that much about all this sort of stuff. And that's sort of the problem, because the more that I think about this movie, the more I equate it to Avengers Age of Ultron. When that movie came out, we all wanted to love it as much as we did the first Avengers. We all wanted to love this movie as much as Spider-Man No Way Home or Doctor Strange 1 for most of us. And it wasn't as good, And that's fine. I mean, granted, I know a lot of people, or I don't know a lot of people, but I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who love this movie more than Spider-Man No Way Home, and love Avengers Age of Ultron more than they love the first Avengers. That's totally fine. I'm just saying for most of us, I don't think that's the case. And another thing, too, is that these two movies seem to be linchpins to setting up future things in the MCU. They seem to serve a similar purpose. Not that this movie was just full of setup. I think that this movie had more of a self-contained, well-told narrative. I think some of the writing in this movie is horrifically bad. I don't know. I just don't understand why we're saying the themes of the movie out loud just at every single juncture, like asking Stephen Strange, at the 3 acts, like the first act break and the second act break, and then at the end of the movie, are you happy? And like Christine Palmer just giving him the speech at the end of the movie about, where they are in their lives and what she means to him. I just think that the writing might have been one of the key things that made this movie a little bit lackluster. And I don't know if that lends to this post-credit scene being less interesting, but I just really don't see myself as interested in the future of the MCU. Just like how after Age of Ultron, I wasn't super interested in Thor's quest to find Infinity Stones. And hopefully, just like with Age of Ultron afterwards, with subsequent movies, they'll get me back invested in the overall story, just like they did with the Infinity Stones, and we'll be back on board with the multiverse at some point in the near future. So, I think that the more I think about, this movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, it is very much akin to Avengers Age of Ultron. It is sort of a good, not great story, with a lot of characters, a lot of things going on, some kind of clunky writing, some clunky characters, some clunky things, but some great things, like a great villain in Scarlet Witch, in my opinion. Another great performance by Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. It's always just good to see how inventive his magic can get with the music and with the giant monsters and things like that. And it's a movie that I'll probably see again, when it comes out on Disney Plus in just a few weeks. And then I'll probably not see it again until I just, I do my full rewatches, which, oh man, just thinking about watching 50 MCU projects is, oh man, it's crazy. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And speaking of the next MCU project, let's turn our attention to Kamala Khan in Ms. Marvel. So the first episode of Ms. Marvel dropped on Disney Plus this morning. I had a chance to watch it, and let's talk about it. This this review in particular will not be as long as the other ones. We'll kind of just go through some things, and we'll go through the post-credit scene just really quickly, and then we will be on to Obi-Wan and on to Stranger Things. So this show, it's no secret to anybody, I don't think, that's been watching my channel. Apologies, I'm going to take a sip of water. My voice is getting a little hoarse. Anyways, it's no secret to anybody that this show is not close to my top anticipated MCU projects for Phase 4. It really was towards the bottom. And that's not to say that I didn't think that the show would be any good. I just didn't have any interest in a character who idolized Captain Marvel, who is one of my not as favorite MCU heroes. Again, not because she's, a female, or not because she's super powerful, but really just because I think Brie Larson was miscast in the role. I don't think that her performance is super great. All that aside, the Marvels is still a project that I am skeptical about because I didn't love Monica Rambeau in WandaVision. I don't love Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, but if there will be one saving grace to the Marvels, hopefully, at least, it will be Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan. She is wonderful. We'll talk about young Leia in just a little bit. I think young Leia is absolutely way too young to be 10 years old. I think Kamala Khan, on the other hand, is perfect as a 16-year-old kid. I think that one of the strengths of this show, actually, right off the bat, obviously is visually, as we can see with shots like this and how she's daydreaming. Full spoilers, by the way. I said I wasn't going to say it again. I'll just briefly say it again. Full spoilers if you haven't seen this episode. How she's kind of daydreaming and how all the text bubbles are coming up, and it's just so inventive. It's so fresh to see that kind of thing. It feels obviously younger, not just with the characters, but in tone. But also, I think that it works because, Iman Vellani plays it sincerely. I think that Tom Holland was really good at playing sort of the back end of high school, heading into adulthood kind of high school, still angsty, still teenager, still got problems. Iman Vellani plays sort of the more youthful, vibrant side of high school. Still kind of getting picked on and all those classic tropes of superheroes and stuff. But also, and hey, look at how all these things are connecting, kind of like Stranger Things, with Eleven and her struggles at school. It's really kind of, it's a classic trope to see a kid getting bullied at school and not kind of being the cool kid. But it's also really endearing to see how they overcome them and how their friends kind of help. And the guy who plays Bruno in this show, I believe his name is Bruno, is really good. I really think they do a good job of establishing a close friendship in just one episode of television. And I'm really, really enjoying that aspect of the show. I think that her parents and the culture, the Muslim American Pakistani background of the character is really shining through. And as somebody who is not part of that background, it's still allowing me to understand what the character is going through. And really, there are a lot of themes in this show as well, even if you're not part of any of those demographics or backgrounds, that are universal as well. Just sort of not being understood by your parents and the part of what am I trying to say? Society that you're a part of. It actually reminded me a lot of Turning Red, the Pixar movie that came out a few months ago. Just sort of learning to accept who you are and be that unique blend of you and your parents and your upbringing that you were meant to be. And obviously she idolizes Captain Marvel. She wants to go to Avengers Con. Avengers Con was pretty fun, by the way. Again, just kind of this really wild convention based on the Avengers with the Tony and Natasha tribute and the giant Ant-Man head rolling around, and it was fun. It was fun to kind of see it from that perspective. I think that these kinds of things are what make the MCU more rich, just seeing it from different perspectives and different people, from different backgrounds. So that was really cool. Obviously planning on making the costume and all sort of stuff. It was great. And yeah, let's talk about the bracelet for a second. It seems like from episode 1, it's sort of implying that it was a family heirloom kind of a thing. I don't know if it truly was. I kind of get these 10 Rings vibes, like these are actually ancient artifacts that were discovered by certain people and, giving them powers, I would be fine with that, honestly. Like if it were somehow to have been passed down through this family, somewhere in history, and it ended up with Kamala, just like how the Ten Rings ended up with Shang-Chi, and maybe the two of them will kind of, like go to Bruce Banner and say like, what are these artifacts? Or obviously Kamala would be going to Carol Danvers and things like that. But yeah, no, I think that is really cool. I really was surprised at how charmed and endeared I was by the first episode. It really will probably not be a top 10 MCU thing at all. But that's okay. I think this could end up just being one of the most fun, vibrant, rewatchable MCU projects, just based on how lovingly everybody is really taking this show. And I'm really excited about that. Now, really quickly before we move on to Obi-Wan, who's up next, there was a quick post-credit scene, which was a little surprising, and it's the damage control guy from Spider-Man No Way Home. I knew he was going to show up again somewhere. Didn't know it was going to be episode 1. I don't know why damage control wants Kamala in particular. I think it's cool, I guess, to have these characters showing up in other projects. I'd like to know why. And obviously, I'm sure they'll give a good reason, or maybe they won't, but they'll give a reason. And we'll see what that is. So yeah, I'm really enjoying Miss Marvel thus far, and I can't wait for episode 2. Can't believe I'm saying that, but hey, go into a show with your expectations. With no expectations, not no expectations, just leave your expectations at the door, and you will most likely be pleasantly surprised. So there it is. All right. Let's talk about Obi-Wan. I have seen episode 4. It came out this morning. If you have not seen episode 4, come back later. Save this video to watch later. Jump ahead to Stranger Things 4 if you've seen Stranger Things 4. But let's talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, because I haven't had a chance to really talk about the whole series so far, I'm going to go through episode by episode, briefly going through episodes 1 through 3, and then really talking about episode 4 and my overall thoughts of the show thus far. So episode 1 opens with this incredible sequence with younglings and Order 66. I think it is just such a bold move, and obviously we know that, well, we don't know this, but we think that Reva. I'm gonna call her Reva. I know that they're calling her Reva or something like that in the show. I'm just gonna say Reva. If that's blatantly incorrect, correct me in the comments. But Reva is most likely one of these younglings. So that's why this sequence is in the show at the beginning. We'll talk about Reva later on, played by Moses Ingram, but. This sequence was just really cool to watch, just to see the live action clone troopers coming in and seeing a different perspective of Order 66 and seeing just how, what the Jedi Temple really looked like during that time. I think that is such a bold way to open the show. And it was a little surprising to not see Obi-Wan, not in this sequence, but just sort of to not open the Obi-Wan show with Obi-Wan. But I still think that it was a really fun way to do that. Nonetheless. Now, once we do get to Obi-Wan, he's really a broken shell of a man. He is not the same person that we saw in episode 3, episode 2, not the Clone Wars. He is dejected, he is lost, and he really does not want to connect to the Force. Now, as those of you who have been watching the channel know, I am a Last Jedi defender. I am not only a Last Jedi defender, except for the Canto Bight stuff. I think that should have been cut out. But not only am I a Last Jedi defender, I am a Last Jedi Luke defender. I am not going to go out here and say that, oh, you all are loving Obi-Wan in this show, therefore you should love Luke in The Last Jedi. I don't think those two things are the same. So it may surprise you to hear that I am not one of those people who say, well, you should love Luke in The Last Jedi because you love Obi-Wan in the Obi-Wan series. I think there are two different character arcs that, to me, work equally as well. But I do want to point out, just quickly before going on to other things, that I do believe that they're different. Just different circumstances and different places in their lives. That being said, I do think it's ironic that where they land up, Luke in The Last Jedi and Obi-Wan, are pretty similar characters, you know? I mean, Luke is a little bit more grumpy, but Obi-Wan is like, hey, I don't want any part of this anymore. The Force, I don't want to do that anymore. So I just think it's funny, you know. I wanted to point that out just because I love The Last Jedi, again, except for Canto Bight, and wanted to, I don't know, make you guys mad, whatever. But anyways, I think the character development for Obi-Wan just straight off the bat is so interesting. And having him be that dejected, you know, lost Jedi is a great way to start the series. We move on with Joel Edgerton returning as Owen. This scene with Reva was so good. So good. I think this is some of the best acting that Joel Edgerton has done as Owen. And I think that this is probably, some spoiler alert, some of the best acting that Moses Ingram has done as Reva throughout the series. Now, just really quickly, I know that this has been talked about before. I just want to put in my 2 cents really quickly. It's not going to be different than what a lot of people have been saying, but I think it's important as somebody who has 700 some people subscribed to the channel, and as somebody who has 10, 20, 30 people listen to this video and this podcast. I want to just give my 2 cents on this really quickly, just because I have some influence and I want to use it. For those of you who don't know, or who do know, at least, that after the first few episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Moses Ingram, the actress who plays Reva, a black woman, got some direct messages from people who basically said that her performance and her acting and herself are just bad because of who she is and her identity. And I just want to make it very clear. I'm not going to talk about this for too much longer, but I think it's important. If anybody on this channel dislikes Moses Ingram's performance as Reva, that's fine. I personally don't love Moses Ingram's performance as Reva. I think it's okay. And so if you just simply don't like the performance based on the performance, that's fine. It's your opinion. But if anybody on this channel doesn't like either Moses Ingram or her performance because of who she is as a black woman, quite frankly, I don't think you should be subscribed to this channel. It's not the type of thinking that I want anywhere on my videos. It's corrosive. I personally believe Star Wars has some of the worst fans in the entire fandom, and it showed. And if anybody has any inclination to judge another person based on their race, gender, sexuality, identity, anything like that, just inherently calling other people certain things just because of, parts of their identity, then I frankly think that you shouldn't be here on this channel. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And I want, again, it's a preface of me saying that I myself am one of those people who don't really love Moses Ingram's portrayal of Reva thus far through the first 4 episodes. I'm obviously not going to sit here and say it's because of any part of who she is. I just don't think that I like the character that much, and so I wanted to make that clear. Anyways, let's keep going. The Grand Inquisitor, who we'll get to in just a second, I think is actually Rupert. His name is Rupert Friend, I think. Is probably more intimidating than I thought he'd be. I was pretty surprised by that. We can actually, I don't think I have a slide for him yet, or for episode 2, so we'll talk about his death right now. The writers have said that they are not going to retcon canon. They've assured the fans. So we'll see what happens to him. We only have 2 episodes left. I don't know how he's going to come back. Will he? Won't he? I don't know. But you're going to have to figure it out, guys. I kind of thought, going to episode 4 really quickly, those tanks underneath the Inquisitor base were just clones of this guy. There weren't, but yeah, I don't know. I liked him in the first 2 episodes. I was kind of sad to see him go. And yeah, because again, I don't think Reva's story is as compelling as it could have been. But anyways, yeah, here she is again. On Tatooine, kind of, intimidating a bunch of people, inquisiting, maybe. And yeah, let's talk about Leia. You know, I think that the girl who plays Leia, Vivian Lyra Blair, I believe, or Blair Lyra. I will say, like I said before earlier on in the podcast, I think that she is far too young to be 10 years old. And that's a minor gripe, but it is a gripe because Obi-Wan is set up as 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. And I don't buy this girl as 10 years old, to be honest. However, kind of getting past the first couple episodes where she's running through the woods and parkouring and jumping over buildings, I think that she has grown on me quite a bit. The actress playing the character. And I think that the girl does a really good job, the young girl who plays Leia. In terms of character work, though, on the side of the writers and Deborah Chow, I think that getting Leia to be the reason that Obi-Wan leaves Tatooine in the first place is a brilliant idea. Brilliant idea. Because how else are you going to get him off the planet? Leia. Makes total sense. To keep her story going on for this long, it's starting to get old. It is starting to get old. Just to say really quickly before we even talk about Vader, that I have adored every single second of Darth Vader on this show. And by second, I mean seconds. There have been maybe 5 minutes of Darth Vader on this show. And 0 Hayden Christensen. And that is a problem that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So I think that the Leia story should have wrapped up a while ago. You have 2 episodes left, allegedly. Ewan McGregor wants us to think there are more. I don't know about that. But yeah. Episode 2, didn't love as much. I think Kumail is really funny. He was obviously really funny in Eternals. I loved him a lot as Kingo. I think he was just playing Kumail here. Didn't really fit into Star Wars, but just a minor gripe. I don't think he'll come back in the show. Again, Obi-Wan just learning to use the Force in episode 2 again, picking up Leia. I think that was really cool. And Hayden Christensen, making his first appearance, quote unquote, as Darth Vader. That's really fun as well. I think that scene at the end of episode 2 is really great. And again, I think that seeing episode 2 back to back with episode 1 really helped, because I think just watching episode 2 after having waited a week from episode 1 would have really been a bummer. And I'm maybe more of a big proponent on releasing batches of episodes, like episode 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. I still think you get the conversation that you want. Just like how I think The Boys recently released episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 3, and then we'll release weekly, something like that. I think it works well with shows, Stranger Things releasing 7 episodes and then having us wait a month for the next 2 it's really annoying. But I think that, releasing things in batches but not one by one, I think is a good move. So episode 3, to me, obviously, is the best episode of the series. The confrontation between Obi-Wan and Vader, and just really quickly jumping ahead to this shot. This is one of the best shots that Star Wars has ever done ever. This is beautiful. This is wow. We'll get back to that in just a second. But yeah, I think that, this is the promise of the show that I think we were all given. And I'm really bummed out that we have only got 2 episodes left to really deliver on it. Because this episode was really great. I think that this guy played by Zach Braff, who I thought was Seth Rogen for a second. His name was Freck, I think. And then I thought that he was Kermit the Frog for a second. It turns out to be Zach Braff. I thought he was not great. There's Vader again. I'll talk about Vader in a second. This sequence was awesome. I'll talk about it in a second. And I think some of the conversations that Obi-Wan has with Leia are really great. I just don't know if... how do I put this? I think that the things in the episodes themselves are better than the overall story, if that makes sense. I think there are moments that will make really good pieces of Star Wars canon and lore, like Obi-Wan remembering Padme and talking to her about Leia, and making good clips and things like that. It doesn't seem to be fitting the overall story as well of Vader and Obi-Wan that we were promised, but I mean, come on. Look at that. So let's talk about Vader and Obi-Wan in this episode. I mean, everything with Darth Vader in this show has been awesome. James Earl Jones coming back and them, doing whatever they did to his voice. It just works so incredibly well. And that confrontation with him and Obi-Wan, like, obviously, yes. Do I think he should have just walked across or lifted Obi-Wan over the fire and brought him to him? Yeah, obviously. Doesn't really matter that much to me. I think that it was all really great. So that leads us to episode 4. This scene, I kind of jokingly said to a friend that, they could have done Clone Wars flashbacks with the back-to-tank just like they did with Boba Fett. I think Boba Fett kind of ruined the back-to-tank flashbacks because they were so frequent throughout the show. I actually do really wish they did a back-to-tank flashback here. I kind of like the interspersed, flashes between the two of them and all that sort of stuff. But, yeah, I think that, it could have been something else there, something more with that. I'll talk about Vader at the end. Yeah, like this. Okay, so this episode it's the weakest by far. I'll say that first. To me, at least. I think that what bothers me about this episode and what confuses me about the show so far is that this is filler. This did not need to be in this show. And I have had this problem with so many pieces of Disney Plus content. And I'm going to talk about Stranger Things here. I'm going to compare it. I know, doesn't really make that much sense, but it's what's on my mind. I love Stranger Things. Stranger Things so far, throughout 3 and 4.5, 3 full seasons, and then like a half, 3/4 of another season, which is what, 8, 9 to 17. You're gonna listen to me do math here. How many episodes is that? That's 25 plus 7, so through 32 episodes of Stranger Things. One episode, I think, is completely filler. And it's obviously season 2, episode 7, the Lost Sister. I think that is completely filler. Every single other episode is absolutely necessary. That has a lot to do with the way they interweave subplots together. That has a lot to do with the way that the episodes are long. And that has a lot to do with the way that the show has a complete story. These Disney Plus shows don't have those things. And that makes these episodes, some of these Disney Plus episodes feel wasted. And that's what this episode is. It's a lot of plot, like a lot of just a rescue mission and just kind of going and rescuing Leia. This scene was cool with the water, upholding the hallway. This scene, it is what it is. This scene was really cool. Vader just storming in. He's furious at Reva. That's really cool. That is one of the best scenes in the entire show, by far. But these scenes just make me go, what is the point of this show? Because again, we know what's going to happen to Obi-Wan. So you can't, if you kill off Obi-Wan, I mean, the fan base's going to riot. But anyways, we know what's going to happen to Obi-Wan. We know what's going to happen to Anakin. We thought we knew what was going to happen to the Grand Inquisitor. I guess we don't. We know what's going to happen to the fifth brother. He's going to come back in Rebels. We know what's going to happen to Owen. We know what's going to happen to Luke. We know what's going to happen to Leia. The stakes in this show do not revolve around what's going to happen to the characters. They revolve around what the characters go through emotionally. Anakin and Obi-Wan specifically. And we haven't gotten much of that in this show. And that's my problem with it so far. I thought after episodes 1 and 2 that Obi-Wan Kenobi could have been the greatest piece of Star Wars content made in a long time. It's not going to be. No matter how good episodes 5 and 6 are, the overall show is not going to... It has its problems. I'm one of those people who don't love The Mandalorian. I like it a lot. It's too episodic. It's too serialized. It's too filler in certain places for me to enjoy it as a full, complete story. Obviously, Book of Boba Fett. Clone Wars I love. But I think the last piece of just truly amazing Star Wars content that they made was Rogue One. And the way that Obi-Wan has been going, I just don't know. Episodes 5 and 6, you can have the best Obi-Wan Vader stuff, and it still might not be enough. We'll have to wait and see. All right. last thing up, and then my voice is going to die. So, Stranger Things, Season 4, Volume 1. Let's talk about it. So the way that I'm going to structure this, this review is I'm going to go by groups of characters. I know a lot of people have been doing that on the reviews. I think it's the most constructive, because the show has really split up their characters. So let's start first with the Hawkins group. And then I'll kind of sort of encapsulate my overall thoughts of the show within these separate groups. So the Hawkins group, I think, is good for the most part. I think that there are some things in there that I don't love. Just looking at this picture, I think that Dustin and Steve, I think Steve is going to die in Volume 2. I'm one of those people who, given how they've built up the relationships between him and Dustin and him and Nancy and him and Robin, I think Steve's time is almost up. I think that there is a reason that Dustin is sort of annoyed at Steve the entire season so far, which doesn't always work. I think it kind of makes me wonder why Dustin is so mean to Steve all the time, and Steve is kind of mean back to Dustin, and Steve doesn't want to be a babysitter and all that sort of stuff. It's funny, but I think that there's a reason, because it kind of, if Steve dies, Dustin will kind of be sad about it and all that sort of stuff. So character development, things like that. Just a guess. Dustin, again, I think is sort of the comic relief, if you will. I think he brings a lot more. Gaten Matarazzo brings a lot more to the show than just that. But I think that overall, he has a lot of really funny scenes in the show, which is good. I think that Maya Hawke as Robin is interesting. She's interesting because, I think that they do expand upon a lot of the great backstory that they've given her in Season 3. I also think that just characterization-wise, she comes off as a very different character than in Season 3, and it might just have to do with who she's in proximity with. That's kind of why I wanted her to have more scenes with Steve, because in Season 3, you see her with Steve, and she's the assertive one, right? She's the one who is bossing him around and making fun of him and calling him, a dingus, and all these sorts of things. And then when she's with Nancy and when she's with basically everyone else, she's just this nervous, talkative, rambling, kind of really, really giving this image of, just nervous. That didn't quite seem to be the character that she was in Season 3, and I think it's fine. I think it works for the most part. I just think it's an interesting character change to give her. Lucas, I think, has some really interesting character development with the basketball team and sort of how he's a part of it with Jason and all that sort of stuff. I think it sort of goes away towards the end, but I think it's fine. I think that they gave him a lot more to do than he had in previous seasons, and I'm really glad for it. This scene was funny when they're talking to the police. That was good. This scene was also funny when Dustin jumps over the counter to get to the computer. But the character that I think stands out the most easily is Sadie Sink as Max. Her performance, obviously, in the Dear Billy episode, obviously, but she overall throughout the season just gives a dynamite performance, and I am so glad, because Max was one of those characters in seasons 2 and 3 that I was a little iffy on. I liked her more and more as we got along seasons 2 and seasons 3, and season 4 just really, really expands upon the character in a beautiful way with the trauma and the loss that she feels with Billy, and the way that Vecna preys upon that. And overall, I think that the Hawkins group is really staying true to what Stranger Things is, right? The mystery element of going to the Creel house and figuring things out, and trying to figure out this mystery of what's happening in Hawkins and why is Vecna coming and things like that. So I think that this group and their storyline works really well for the most part. Okay, let's talk about my least favorite storyline. Let's talk about these guys. Jonathan, Will, and Mike. We'll talk about where is he? We'll talk about Argyle in just a little bit, but Jonathan, Will, and Mike. This storyline is not good, and it bums me out because I love these characters, right? I love Jonathan, I love Will, and I love Mike. These characters are not good in the season. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to them. I do know that they're not good, and that is a bummer. Because let's go from left to right, right? I mean, first of all, they're on the run for most of the season, and their storyline kind of just becomes superfluous at a certain point. And literally, as much as I love episode 7 of season 4, The Massacre at Hawkins Lab, about 20 minutes in, I realized that we hadn't cut back to this storyline. And then about 40 minutes into the hour and 40-minute episode, I realized, no, we still haven't cut back to this storyline. And the more we got onto it, the more I realized we weren't going to cut back to the storyline. And I think the writers just kind of didn't know what to do with these characters, and that's really kind of a bummer. But anyway, so let's start with Jonathan on the left. Jonathan is one of the most disappointing characters to me in this entire season. I understand kind of the joke of going to California and becoming more of like a stoner and bringing in Argyle and things like that. I think there are some funny scenes, like the scene at the dinner table with Joyce. That being said, it seems like they just didn't know what to do with the character, because the sort of on and off stuff he has with Nancy that's sort of addressed at the beginning is so bizarre to me. And I don't quite know how to think about it. Like, I personally don't love the idea of Nancy getting back together with Steve, even though I love Steve. I think Steve needs to find his own people and his own identity if he's not going to, die at the end of the season. And I think Nancy needs to be with Jonathan, like, not just because of any arbitrary reason, but just because that's what they've set up in the show. Shared trauma, right? And I think that the on and off thing again is just artificial drama at this point. If Steve survives season 4, or even if Jonathan survives season 4, he may not. Nancy might not. Who knows? But I think it's bizarre. I really do. Will, again, doesn't have much to do. I think he has some feelings for characters, maybe Mike or maybe Elle or no, wait, know what I'm saying. Mike has feelings for Elle. Will might have feelings for Mike. It'll get complicated. Sorry. We've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes. I'm saying random stuff. Anyways. And then there's Mike, who I don't understand why he can't say I love you to Elle after everything that, and by the way, before I watched season 4, I binged all of seasons 1 through 3 again, for like the third time. It is amazing, by the way. And 11 says I love you at the end of season 3. So I don't understand what is going on here that he can't say it back to her. It seems bizarre. It seems weird. It seems unnatural. Is that the right word to say here? Yeah, it feels like these characters, they just didn't know what to do with them. And then they, again, we'll talk about Argyle in just a little bit. And then they go to Utah. And it's hard, it's hard to really get behind this group, and it's a bummer because I really like these characters. But again, I like the beginning part a little bit more where they're all together here, in California and things like that. But again, just I don't know, not my favorite arc at all. 11. Let's talk about 11. I think 11L has some really good stuff in this series, this season. I also think that some of the stuff gets dragged on because, to be quite honest, a lot of it is flashback, right? Like it's an interesting way to give backstory, because if you think about it, this entire season is just Elle flashback for her character after like episode 3. And while I think they do it well, I think also, obviously we'll get to Vecna. We'll get to Henry in just a second. Oops. But I think that on the one hand, I'm impressed with how well they give the backstory and make it feel like it's an integral part of the story, which it is. On the other hand, it's just backstory. It's exposition, right? I think Millie Bobby Brown obviously gives a great performance. Again, she always does. I'm a little torn on this character arc, to be quite honest with you. So there's that. And then we got Joyce and Murray and Hopper. Another character arc that I think was dragged on way too long. I think it's fine. Well, so, okay, first of all, I think the Joyce and Murray stuff is much more interesting than the Hopper stuff because they actually have things to do. Like, getting Hopper himself is so interesting. It's much more interesting. I think the stuff with Yuri is funny. Hopper, I don't think has anything really interesting to do in this show. And that's such a bummer because seasons 1 through 3, Hopper was the character, right? He was the main character of the series, basically. I mean, aside from 11. And him and Joyce were really leading the first 2 seasons, and they kind of took the backseat in the 3rd season, but they were still doing things with Alexi and with Murray. The fact that through 7 episodes, we've just finally got to the Demogorgon fight, and they're just finally maybe getting out of the prison, it feels like a wasted opportunity. I think there's a line where Hopper says something like, maybe I can help 11. I don't know how you're helping 11 by killing one Demogorgon. Maybe we'll see how that factors in later on in the series. I don't know. But again, it felt like a wasted opportunity. And here he is with his buddy. I like their interactions. I don't dislike watching any of it. I just think it got dragged on for way too long. Let's talk about the new characters. I picked the goofiest picture of Eddie. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to stare at this for just a few seconds, but I think Eddie really grew on me as the series went on. I thought he was very weird and eccentric and just kind of the crazy guy, the outcast of high school. At first, and I really got to like him through his vulnerability. I don't know if he's gonna be elevated to Steve and Jonathan status, by the end of the season, maybe. But I did really like him. Argyle, on the other hand, I didn't love. And maybe that's just part of the reason. It's just because he's part of that weird storyline with Will, Jonathan, and Mike, where they're just kind of going around the country and finding Susie and going on a goose chase to find 11. I don't know. Maybe I just don't love the performance by Eduardo Franco, I believe is the actor's name. I don't love Argyle. But wrapping up the show, and again, tying in all of my cumulative thoughts on the show is Vecna. So we have all of these storylines that are converging, but the one thing that holds them all together is Vecna. And this is what Stranger Things does so well, is that it has all of these plot points and plot elements and characters and stories, but it's all tied together by one continuous thread. It could have been the Mind Flayer, Billy, Will and the Mind Flayer. It was the Demogorgon in season 1, and now it's Vecna. And I love Vecna. The kills are gruesome and horrifying and just show how terrifying this character is. Obviously, we get the revelation that it is Victor Creel's son, Henry, who is revealed to be one, which is, just such a great twist, I think. The ending was a little exposition heavy of him just kind of telling everything to 11. But I think that the way that they finally begin to wrap things up into the show and make it feel as satisfying as it does is so impressive. They've been able to do that for all 3 seasons before. It's truly impressive how they're able to do that. And I think that while I have questions about the Vecna twist, sort of like what he has to do with the previous 3 seasons and how he factors in, because I think Dustin called him the Mind Flayer's 5-star general. Is that true? Is that just Dustin's speculation? Is Vecna actually just a pawn to somebody else? I don't know. But regardless, I think that, just look at that design, and it's mostly practical too, which is crazy. That this really encapsulates my thoughts on Stranger Things. Is that, there are messy things, right? There are things that I don't like as much. Here's Argyle for one. Here's Popper for another. Here's this storyline with these 3 for another. But at the end of the day, what Stranger Things is able to do is just wrap it up together in such a nice, satisfying, cohesive way that makes it feel like it's all one giant story that's unraveling itself as you go along. And that's what I think television is really, really for, right? It's not to tell a movie in 6 parts, really. I'm sorry, Marvel, it isn't. It's really to do this, to explore characters, to really, where is she? There he is. To explore characters in depth like Max, to give character interactions that we haven't seen before. You know, to give more backstory, to go on side adventures, and to, you know, introduce new characters, and ultimately have a story, have a point. And I think that is what Stranger Things Season 4, Volume 1 does so well. I think episodes 7 and 4 are easily the best ones of the entire season. Obviously, episode 4, Dear Billy, carried by Sadie Sink's performance, beautiful. I think episode 7 was just great in the revelations, and I can't wait for 8 and 9. And with that, guys, that is it. We have done it. My voice is about to go, so it's about a good time to wrap up today's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. I know we ran a little bit long, but again, I wanted to get out all these reviews for you guys before we head out for the next episode. I don't think the next episodes will be as long as this one. I just wanted to. It was a little bit of a catch-up episode, you know, going through all the things that we had missed and talking about all of them in as much detail as I could. So if you enjoyed this episode, if you're looking forward to things over the summer, please be sure to subscribe, give the video a like. If you like the video format with all the images and all that sort of stuff, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. If you didn't like it, if you hated it, also let me know in the comments down below, and I will be sure to go back or make some changes. And with that, guys, that is about it. Let me know what you'd like to see in future episodes. If you have questions, leave them down below, and I will see you in the next one.